2 years ago, the West Hollywood lot was nothing more than a hollow concrete cavern smelling of exposed plaster, dry wood, and the bitter asphalt of Los Angeles. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, turning the skeletal frame of what would eventually become Lapis Blue L.A. into a sweltering furnace. Dust motes danced lazily in the heavy air, kicked up by the boots of construction crews. Tasha James stood near the entrance of the unfinished lobby, holding a cardboard tray of iced coffees. It was exactly 1 year to the day since Marcus had died. The small silver promise ring he had given her still hung around her neck on a delicate chain, hidden beneath her shirt, a cold, heavy weight against her collarbone. Grief had become a quiet, familiar shadow she carried everywhere, a shield against a world she no longer trusted. She had only stopped by the site to drop off drinks for Aaliyah, who was buried under blueprints in a makeshift plywood office. Tasha was about to call out her friend's name when she saw him. Hyun-Suk was working alongside the local framing crew, lifting a massive, raw timber beam onto his shoulder. His linen shirt was damp with sweat, clinging to the broad, corded muscles of his back and shoulders. The rolled-up sleeves exposed the intricate, dark ink of his tattoos, heavy, traditional Korean waves and wind bars that crawled up his forearms, stark and intimidating in the California sun. Tasha's breath caught, a sudden, inexplicable jolt of heat blooming in her chest. She took a step back, her eyes tracking the powerful, predatory grace of his movements. He carried himself with the heavy, unyielding presence of a man who had survived war zones, yet there was a deep, quiet weariness in his posture. As if sensing her gaze, Hyun-Suk turned. He lowered the timber, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm, and his dark, piercing eyes locked onto hers. The chaotic noise of the circular saws and the shouting of the crew faded into a dull, distant hum. For several long, agonizing seconds, neither of them moved. Tasha's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the shadows in his eyes instantly, the unmistakable, sharp vigilance of a bad boy who lived in the dark. A cold panic washed over her, instantly triggering her defenses. "No, not again. I am not doing this again," Tasha admonished herself. Hyun-Suk stared at the beautiful, dark-skinned woman standing in the dusty doorway. She looked entirely out of place in her pristine, tailored scrubs, her long, dark curls framing a face that was calm but guarded. Her eyes held a deep, lingering sorrow that he recognized all too well. He felt a sudden, fierce pull toward her, a magnetic hum that vibrated deep in his bones. But as he looked down at his own dusty, scarred hands, a familiar bitterness settled in his throat. He was a street soldier from Busan, covered in dirt and the blood of a past he was desperately trying to outrun. He was barely learning how to speak English without an accent, trying to support his sister and build a legitimate life from scratch. She was a brilliant, clean, life-saving trauma nurse. He wasn't in her league. He had no business even looking at a woman like her. "Aaliyah is in the back," Hyun-Suk said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the quiet space. He didn't step closer, keeping a deliberate, respectful distance. "Thank you," Tasha replied, her voice steady and detached, though her fingers gripped the cardboard coffee tray a little tighter. She stepped past him, her head held high. But as she brushed by, the wind shifted, carrying the faint, intoxicating scent of his cedarwood cologne and raw wood. The physical awareness of him lingered on her skin like a burn, long after she had disappeared into Aaliyah's office. 18 months ago, the rain over East Los Angeles was a persistent, depressing drizzle that slicked the asphalt and blurred the neon signs of the late-night storefronts. It was 3:00 a.m. Inside a quiet vinyl booth diner down the street from St. Jude's Hospital, the air smelled of grease and old coffee. Tasha sat alone in the corner booth, her knees pulled up to her chest beneath an oversized sweater. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She had spent the last 5 hours in Trauma Bay 2, her hands slick with the blood of a 17-year-old boy who had been shot in a drive-by. She had pumped his chest, pushed the drugs, and screamed at him to stay alive, only to watch his monitor go flat. She had stood in the waiting room afterward, watching his mother collapse into a heap on the linoleum floor. The agonizing memory of Marcus's death had rushed back, suffocating her. The bell above the diner door chimed softly. Tasha didn't look up, wanting nothing more than to be invisible. But a shadow fell over her table, and the quiet, heavy scent of cedarwood and rain instantly filled her senses. Hyun-Suk stood by the booth, wearing a dark leather jacket, his hair damp from the storm. He had just finished a brutal 18-hour shift, supervising the late-night steel delivery at Lapis Blue. He looked exhausted, his jaw lined with dark stubble, but his eyes were fixed entirely on her. He didn't ask if he could sit. He didn't ask if she was okay. Instead, he silently slid into the booth directly across from her. He signaled the tired waitress, ordering a pot of hot chamomile tea and a plate of warm biscuits. "I don't want company, Hyun-Suk," Tasha whispered, her voice cracking with the weight of her unshed tears. She wouldn't look at him, staring down at her cold hands. "I know," Hyun-Suk replied quietly, his low voice carrying a soothing, steady calm. "You do not have to speak to me. Just eat. Then I will leave." When the tea arrived, he poured a cup for her, his large, scarred hand remarkably steady as he pushed the mug across the laminate table. As he did, he subtly shifted his massive shoulders, blocking her from the view of the rowdy truck drivers at the counter, shielding her vulnerability from the rest of the world. Tasha stared at the steaming tea. A single hot tear escaped her lashes, rolling down her cheek. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around the warm mug. "Why are you here?" she breathed. "I saw your car in the lot," Hyun-Suk said, his dark eyes searching hers with a quiet, devastating gentleness. "You looked like you needed a quiet place. I can be quiet." They sat in silence for an hour. Neither of them spoke, yet the space between them was charged with a deep, magnetic energy. Every time her breathing hitched, he would adjust his posture, a silent anchor in her storm. And for the first time in 18 months, Tasha felt the cold grip of her grief loosen, replaced by the warm, steady presence of the man sitting across from her. A year ago, construction of Lapis Blue L.A. was entering its final, most delicate phase. The massive, custom-tinted sapphire blue glass panels, imported from Europe to give the lounge its signature underwater glow, were being hoisted into the steel frames of the second-story facade. Tasha stood on the sidewalk below, having stopped by to pick up Aaliyah for a quick dinner. She watched the heavy cranes guide the massive blue panes into place. Hyun-Suk was on the high scaffolding, barking instructions to the rigging crew in his gravelly voice. He wore a fitted black t-shirt and a tool belt, his muscles straining as he guided the heavy glass panel. Suddenly, a loud metallic snap echoed through the air. One of the high-tension steel cables guiding the pane frayed and snapped with the sound of a gunshot. The massive, heavy glass panel swung violently, threatening to crush a young apprentice worker pinned against the steel frame. "Watch out!" Hyun-Suk roared. Without a second thought, Hyun-Suk lunged forward. He shoved the apprentice out of the way, catching the swinging, sharp edge of the sapphire glass with his bare hands to guide it back into the safety lock. The sheer weight of the glass dragged him forward, the sharp edge slicing deeply across his palm and knuckles. Blood immediately welled from the wound, dripping onto the concrete below, but he didn't let go until the rigging crew secured the lock. Tasha's heart leapt into her throat. Before she could register what she was doing, she ran inside the site, grabbing the heavy trauma kit she always kept in the trunk of her car. "Hyun-Suk!" she called out, her voice tight with panic. Hyun-Suk climbed down the scaffolding, his face pale but his expression completely blank, as if the physical pain meant nothing to him. He was wrapping a dirty shop rag around his bleeding hand. "Do not touch that," Tasha commanded, her clinical authority snapping into place as she grabbed his uninjured wrist. "You're going to give yourself an infection. Sit down." She forced him onto a stack of sheetrock, kneeling directly in front of him. She pulled sterile gauze, antiseptic, and a suture kit from her bag. "It is nothing," Hyun-Suk muttered, trying to pull his hand back. "I have had worse." I don't care what you've had in Busan, Tasha snapped, her hands trembling slightly as she unwrapped the bloody rag. You are in my world now. Quiet. As she poured the antiseptic over his deep laceration, Hyun-Suk's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white as he absorbed the burn. But he didn't pull away. Tasha worked quickly, her face inches from his chest. The proximity was intoxicating. She could hear the rapid, heavy beat of his heart. She could smell the sharp, metallic tang of his blood mixed with his cedarwood cologne. As she began to carefully stitch the skin of his palm, her fingers brushed against his. Every touch sent a violent, breathless shiver straight up her spine. She was painfully aware of his dark eyes tracking every movement of her face, his gaze heavy and intensely focused. You are very good at this, Hyun-Suk whispered, his gravelly voice dropping to a low, intimate register. I have to be, Tasha replied, her voice shaking slightly as she tied off the first knot. She looked up, her gaze locking with his. I spend my life patching up men who think they are invincible. I do not think I am invincible, Hyun-Suk said softly, his eyes dropping to her lips before rising back to her eyes. I know exactly how fragile I am. The honesty of his words hung between them, thick and breathless. Tasha's breath hitched. She wanted to pull away, to run from the terrifying pull of his presence, but she was entirely paralyzed by the sheer warmth of his hand in hers. All done, she whispered, her voice barely audible as she bandaged his hand. She stood up quickly, packing her kit to hide the trembling of her hands. Hyun-Suk stood as well, looking down at his bandaged palm, then back at her. Thank you, Tasha, he said quietly. Don't do it again, Kim, she said, her voice guarded as she stepped back into the safety of her armor. I won't always be here to save you. But as she walked away, both of them knew it was a lie. The invisible electric cord connecting them had grown too tight to break. The scent of blooming jasmine from the outdoor terrace mingled with the rich, heavy aroma of expensive Italian leather inside the main lounge of Lapis Blue L.A. Outside, the harsh, unforgiving Los Angeles sun beat down relentlessly on the West Hollywood pavement, baking the asphalt. But inside, the atmosphere was cool, insulated, and bathed in a deep, sapphire blue glow that filtered through custom-tinted glass. It was a space designed to make the outside world fade away. For Hyun-Suk and Jae-Seung, the transition from the chaotic, rain-slicked harbor of Busan, where every shadow held a potential blade, to these quiet, sun-bleached avenues had been dizzying. Yet looking around the pristine lounge, it felt as though they had finally crossed some invisible, impossible finish line. Aaliyah ran her fingers along the smooth, cool white marble of the main bar, a soft, genuine smile playing on her lips as she looked at her reflection in the polished surface. It's beautiful, Oppa, Aaliyah said, turning to her older brother, her eyes reflecting the soft, ambient blue lights. Business is booming, the reservations are overflowing, the design is immaculate. I couldn't be prouder of you. You actually did it. You built something clean. Hyun-Suk leaned his heavy frame against the back bar, his large, scarred hands carefully adjusting the silver cufflinks of his tailored charcoal suit. For a brief, fleeting second, the permanent, watchful tension that usually stiffened his broad shoulders melted away. Thanks, little sis, Hyun-Suk replied, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that still carried the rhythmic cadence of his native tongue. Your support, it means everything to me. Seriously. Even though Jay and I have run these financial numbers 100 times in the office, hearing you say it makes it feel real. Like we didn't just build another club, but a real, lasting future. Jae-Seung walked up from the quiet office corridor, holding a heavy metal clipboard and looking unusually relaxed. He wore a light linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the corded muscles of his forearms, free of the formal jackets he usually favored. He slung a comfortable arm around Aaliyah's waist, pulling her flush against his side and kissing the crown of her head. We're fully booked for the private dining rooms upstairs tonight, Jae-Seung said, looking at Hyun-Suk with a knowing, triumphant smirk. Which means the legitimate life actually suits you. No secret back rooms, no hidden ledger books we have to burn when the sirens get too loud in the street. Just high-end sake, imported whiskey, and overpriced wagyu. The Deep Blue Sea room is strictly VIP dining now. No blood contracts allowed. Don't get used to me being this soft, Lee, Hyun-Suk muttered, though there was a rare, genuine sparkle of amusement in his dark eyes. I still have to check the inventory twice because the local distributors think they can slide second-rate tequila past a foreign owner. I had to remind one of them yesterday exactly who he was dealing with. Please tell me you didn't threaten to throw him off the Santa Monica Pier, Aaliyah teased, her eyes widening in mock alarm. Oppa, we are in California now. People sue for microaggressions here, let alone syndicate intimidation tactics. I didn't threaten anyone, Hyun-Suk defended himself, raising his hands in innocence. I simply told him that my palate is highly sensitive and my patience is exceptionally short. He apologized, bowed, and upgraded our entire shipment for free. That is called good customer service. Sure it is, Jae-Seung laughed, shaking his head. Anyway, are you guys ready for the big day? The wedding rehearsal is tomorrow afternoon. The florist is calling my cell phone every 20 minutes, the caterer is arguing about the organic microgreens, and I'm about ready to marry Aaliyah in a quiet courthouse just to end the logistical nightmare. Are all your details done? Jae-Seung gave Hyun-Suk a playful nudge. What about you? Are you ready to walk Tasha down the aisle as the maid of honor? Or should we stand, hold hands, and say a prayer for your survival? Because from what Aaliyah tells me, she'd rather walk next to a starved lion. Hyun-Suk rolled his eyes, letting out a sharp, cynical breath as he looked down at the amber liquid in his glass, his mood instantly darkening. Funny, real funny, Jae, Hyun-Suk said. I tried talking to her about the reception timeline earlier today. I saw her by the valet when she dropped off your bridal shower gifts. She didn't even look up from her phone, just assured me she had her side covered, told me to mind my own business, and walked away. Such is life. He paused, his eyes dropping to the polished floorboards as a quiet, unbidden memory surfaced, vivid and heavy in his chest. Earlier that afternoon, Tasha had stepped out of her SUV, balancing two oversized, glittering bridal gift bags against her hip. The dry, white-hot Los Angeles heat had hung thick in the air, making her dark curls cling softly to the nape of her neck. As she turned too quickly, one of the delicate satin straps on the heavier bag snapped with a sharp click. A cascade of silver tissue paper, metallic ribbon, and a beautifully wrapped porcelain vase spilled across the hot, dusty concrete. Before she could even crouch down in her high heels to retrieve them, Hyun-Suk was already there. He didn't speak a word. He simply knelt beside her expensive leather heels in the sweltering California heat, his massive frame casting a protective shadow over her. With slow, deliberate movements, he gathered the scattered silver ribbons in his large, calloused hands, handling the delicate silk bows as if they were made of spun glass. Tasha had stood frozen, her breath catching sharply in her throat as the faint, masculine scent of cedarwood, leather, and a hint of tobacco from his cologne drifted up, completely enveloping her. When he stood up, towering over her, he held the reassembled box out to her. Their fingers brushed, the rough, hard skin of his palm catching against her soft fingertips. A static, physical spark vibrated between them in the brilliant sunlight. You should let people help you sometimes, he had said, his voice unusually quiet, devoid of his usual defensive rumble. And for one dangerous, lingering second, she had stared up into his dark, searching eyes, and almost did. Her chest rose and fell in a shallow, ragged breath. A silent, heavy tension vibrated between them, thick enough to touch, before she abruptly recovered her shield, muttered a cold, hurried thanks, and walked away with her heart hammering against her ribs. She's just protective of me, Aaliyah offered gently, placing a comforting hand on her brother's tense arm, pulling him out of the memory. And she's stressed, Oppa. The trauma bay at St. Jude's has been absolutely chaotic this week. She's working back-to-back double shifts. I think she is beautiful, Hyun-Suk admitted, his voice dropping to a quieter, more vulnerable register that he rarely shared with anyone but his sister. But I have more than enough on my plate without adding a woman who can't stand the sight of me. I get why she feels the way she does about my past. I really do. But there is a limit to how much attitude I can take before I lose my mind. You like the attitude, Hyun-Suk, Jae-Seung countered with a knowing smirk. Don't lie to yourself. Aaliyah was the exact same way with me when we first met in Busan. She looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. The fiery ones are the ones who keep you anchored when the rest of the world is spinning out of control. I don't need an anchor, Hyun-Suk grumbled, turning away to look at the empty stage where a jazz band was setting up. I need a drink, and maybe a different maid of honor to walk with. Across town, in the break room of St. Jude's Hospital, the air was thick, smelling of stale, burnt coffee, cheap microwave meals, and industrial-strength bleach. Tasha James sat on the edge of a cracked blue vinyl couch, rubbing her temples with both hands. Her light blue scrubs were wrinkly, and her eyes carried the deep, bone-weary fatigue of a 14-hour shift in the Level 1 trauma unit. Aaliyah sat across from her on a squeaky plastic chair, having brought a bag of greasy, heavy takeout to bribe her best friend into taking a mandatory 15-minute break. Tasha, seriously, eat something, Aaliyah said softly, leaning forward and pushing a container of noodles toward her. I know you don't want to deal with the kind of world Jay and Oppa came out of. You've spent years patching up boys who thought they were kings of the street. But are you seriously going to keep resisting the obvious connection? Tasha scoffed, taking a small, half-hearted bite of her salad instead. Who said there was a connection? A connection between who? Me and Mr. Tall, Dark, and Dangerous? You memorized his watch, Aaliyah said suddenly, a playful, knowing hum vibrating in her voice. Tasha blinked, her fork freezing halfway to her mouth. What? The black one with the silver face, Aaliyah laughed softly, leaning her chin on her hands and watching her friend's face closely. You mentioned it twice yesterday when you were complaining about how he kept checking the time during our wedding planning call. You even knew about the tiny scratch near the 4 o'clock marker from when he helped move the terrace glass. No one notices the exact dial color, the brushed steel finish, and the physical wear of a man's watch unless they are actively staring at him. I notice details. I'm a trauma nurse, Leia. My entire professional training relies on scanning patients for subtle physical abnormalities, Tasha argued defensively, though a sudden hot flush crept up the back of her neck, betraying her calm exterior. No, Aaliyah countered, her eyes sparkling with sisterly mischief. You notice him. You notice the way he carries the weight of his world in his shoulders. You notice the scars on his knuckles. Tasha sighed, letting her fork drop back into the plastic container as she turned her head to look out the small, smudged break room window at the sprawling, neon-lit L.A. skyline. The lights glittered like scattered embers, beautiful but distant. Aaliyah, I work in a Level 1 trauma bay, Tasha said, her voice losing its playful edge and becoming deadly serious, her gaze locking back onto her friend. I see beautiful, charming men in expensive, tailored suits all the time. You know what they look like 3 hours later? Intubated, bleeding through chest tubes, surrounded by crying mothers, angry detectives, and rival gang members waiting in the lobby. I don't do dangerous in my personal life. I patch up dangerous and send it home. She paused, her throat tightening as she stared down at her bare, scrubbed hands. I spent 3 years of my life waiting up at night for a man who swore he was out of the game. I believed him, Leia, until the night I had to stand in a cold morgue 2 counties over, identifying his body. I promised myself I would never, ever put my heart in the hands of a man who lives in the shadows again. I'm keeping my distance from your brother, for my own sanity. We'll see, Aaliyah whispered, her voice soft but filled with a hopeful glint. You still have to walk down the aisle with him tomorrow, and you have to stand next to him at the rehearsal dinner tonight. I can walk next to a man for 30 seconds without falling into his bed, thank you very much, Tasha retorted, though her heart rate spiked slightly at the sudden intrusive memory of Hyun-Suk kneeling beside her, gathering those silver ribbons with such unexpected, gentle care. I'm a professional, Aaliyah. I can handle one handsome gangster for a weekend. The pre-wedding party at Lapis Blue L.A. was loud, vibrant, and packed with the city's young, wealthy elite. Deep bass from the speakers pulsed through the polished floorboards, and the champagne flowed freely from towers of crystal flutes under the glittering chandeliers. Tasha stood near the edge of the rooftop terrace, a glass of cold white wine held tightly in her hand. She wore an emerald green silk slip dress that contrasted beautifully with her rich, dark skin, her hair styled in soft, elegant curls that framed her face. She was trying her best to enjoy the night and focus on Aaliyah's radiant happiness, but her eyes kept drifting toward the VIP section, specifically to the corner where Hyun-Suk was talking to a group of high-profile real estate investors. He looked devastatingly handsome in a classic black tuxedo, his laughter rare but deeply magnetic when it appeared. He carried himself with an effortless, predatory grace that made everyone else in the room look small. As if feeling the weight of her gaze, Hyun-Suk slowly turned his head. His dark eyes locked onto hers across the crowded, smoke-veiled terrace. The noise of the party, the laughter, and the clinking glasses seemed to fade into a dull, distant hum. He excused himself from the investors and walked straight toward her. But instead of stepping directly in front of her to challenge her, Hyun-Suk stopped beside her, both of them facing the glowing Los Angeles skyline. For several quiet, heavy seconds, neither spoke. The city glittered below them in blurred gold and sapphire light, while warm jazz music drifted from inside the club. Tasha became painfully, exquisitely aware of him standing shoulder to shoulder beside her. They weren't touching, yet they were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his broad frame every time the cool night wind shifted. The fabric of her silk dress brushed against the wool of his tuxedo jacket with every shallow breath she took. It was an agonizing, lingering physical awareness that made the air between them feel thick. "You look exhausted," Hyun-Suk said quietly, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the music. Tasha frowned slightly, turning her head to look at him. "Excuse me?" "Your eyes." His dark gaze softened, dropping to the faint dark circles beneath her long lashes. "You haven't slept properly in days. You look like you're carrying the weight of the entire hospital on your shoulders." The quiet, gentle observation unsettled her far more than any smooth, practiced flirtation would have. It was a completely unguarding gentleness that stripped away Tasha's clinical armor, leaving her feeling raw and exposed under the dim terrace lights. He was actually looking at her, seeing her exhaustion instead of just her beauty. She swallowed hard, turning back to the skyline, her voice losing its sharp edge. "I'm hiding," she admitted, changing the subject with a quiet, defensive chuckle. "Or trying to." "I know," Hyun-Suk said, taking a half-step closer. "But am I still just a disease you're trying to avoid?" "You're putting on a very good show, Hyun-Suk," Tasha said, her tone quiet, though her eyes lingered on the hard line of his jaw. "But I see the scars on your hands. I see the way your eyes scan the exits every single time a door opens. You're a ghost waiting for a graveyard, and I don't want to be the one who has to bury you." Hyun-Suk's jaw tightened. He turned fully to face her, his voice dropping to a low whisper that vibrated in her chest. "Maybe I am a ghost, but what if I'm tired of being dead? What if being around you is the only time I actually feel a pulse?" The silence between them was suffocating, charged with a sudden, heavy heat. Tasha looked away, her breath shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm going to get another drink. This was a mistake." She turned to leave, but before she could take a step, Hyun-Suk reached out. His hand lifted slowly, hovering in the air for a fraction of a second. His fingers, marked with the pale white lines of old scars, trembled slightly, as if he wanted to reach out and gently cup her cheek, to tuck a loose curl behind her ear and wipe away the exhaustion etched there. But he stopped himself. He pulled his hand back, the heavy, aching restraint in his posture shattering her defenses far more effectively than confidence ever could. It was a silent admission of how desperately he wanted her, and how much he respected her fear. The lingering longing between them snapped. When she hesitated, his hand slid down, gently catching her by the wrist before she could step away. His skin was incredibly warm, his grip firm but remarkably gentle. The physical contact sent a violent jolt of electricity through both of them. "Let go," she whispered, though she made no effort to pull away.
"No,"
Hyun-Suk said, his voice raw.
"Not until you look at me and admit that you don't actually hate me. Admit that you're just as terrified of this as I am."
"I don't hate you," Tasha breathed, her defenses finally crumbling under the sheer, undeniable weight of his proximity. "I'm terrified of you because of how much I want you, and I hate myself for it." When Hyun-Suk pulled her slightly closer, Tasha didn't resist. Instead, her hand found the lapel of his tuxedo jacket, her fingers gripping the fabric as she pulled him down into a fierce, desperate kiss. It was messy, passionate, and fueled by a mutual, ravenous hunger. Hyun-Suk groaned into her mouth, his hands finding her waist and pulling her flush against his body. Within minutes, they had slipped away from the crowded terrace, navigating the dimly lit back corridors of Lapis Blue until they reached the quiet sanctuary of his private office. And there, beneath the dim, sapphire blue lights, the thick walls they had built against each other disintegrated into pure, reckless desire. Long after the music downstairs faded into a distant, forgotten hum, Tasha lay curled against his chest on the plush leather sofa. The city shimmered like scattered diamonds outside the massive windows, casting soft blue shadows across their tangled limbs. Hyun-Suk's fingers moved slowly, tenderly through her dark curls, his breathing steady and warm against her forehead. Neither of them spoke. He held her with a quiet, protective safety, his heartbeat slow and deep beneath her ear. "When I'm around you," Hyun-Suk whispered into the quiet dark, his voice rough but incredibly soft. "My head gets quiet. For the first time in my life, the noise stops. I'm not waiting for a blade in the dark." Tasha closed her eyes, tightening her arm around his waist. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. The next morning, the harsh, unforgiving California sun streamed through the sky-blue sheers that covered the floor-to-ceiling windows, letting the rays fill the room like gold lines across the mahogany leather sofa. Tasha stood by the window, already fully dressed in her green silk gown, which was now slightly wrinkled. She was pulling her hair back into a tight professional bun, her face a mask of cold, unyielding regret. The vulnerability and quiet tenderness of the night before had been locked away, replaced by her clinical armor. Hyun-Suk sat on the edge of the leather sofa, his white shirt unbuttoned, his dark hair messy as he watched her with a quiet, heavy heart.
"So," Hyun-Suk began, his voice rough and gravelly from sleep, "we're just going to pretend this didn't happen? We're going to act like last night was just a dream?"
"It was the champagne," Tasha said, her voice steady and detached, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her emerald earrings. "We got carried away. It was a mistake, Hyun-Suk. A massive, unprofessional mistake."
"A mistake,"
he repeated, a bitter, dangerous edge creeping into his tone as he stood up. "Is that what you call what happened between us last night? A mistake?" "Yes," Tasha said, finally turning to look him in the eye. Her gaze was guarded, defensive, shielding the pain underneath. "We work in completely different worlds, Hyun-Suk. You're Aaliyah's brother, and I'm her best friend. We are going to stand at that altar tomorrow. We are going to smile for the wedding cameras, and then we are going to forget this ever happened. Understand?" Hyun-Suk walked over to her, stopping just a foot away. He wanted to reach out, to touch her bare shoulder, to feel the warmth of her skin again, but the icy barrier in her eyes stopped him cold.
"If that is what you need to tell yourself to sleep at night,"
Hyun-Suk said quietly, his voice laced with disappointment.
"But we both know you're lying to yourself, Tasha. You felt what I felt."
"I have an ER shift in an hour," Tasha said, stepping past him without looking back. "I'll see you at the wedding rehearsal. Don't be late." The afternoon rain began to fall over the city, slicking the asphalt streets of Los Angeles with a greasy, rainbow-colored sheen of oil and water. It wasn't the clean, heavy rain of Busan that smelled of salt water, but a dirty, modern Southern California drizzle. Hyun-Suk stood in the narrow alleyway behind Lapis Blue L.A., supervising the delivery of a high-end wine shipment. He was exhausted, his mind entirely consumed by the memory of Tasha's soft skin and the brutal coldness of her departure. He checked his watch, his chest aching with a dull, persistent pain. "Make sure those cases of Brunello go straight to the temperature-controlled cellar," Hyun-Suk instructed the delivery driver, signing the digital tablet with a swift, practiced motion. "We need them ready for the VIP tasting tonight." "You got it, Mr. Kim," the driver said, tipping his hat and climbing back into his truck. "Have a good night." As the truck rumbled out of the alley, the quiet, damp silence of the wet brick corridor settled in. Hyun-Suk turned to walk back inside the club when a sleek black sedan pulled up, blocking the only exit to the street with a quiet, menacing hum. The heavy doors clicked open simultaneously. 3 men stepped out onto the wet asphalt. They wore dark, cheap suits, but it was their faces that made Hyun-Suk's blood run cold. They were Korean, their expressions hard, carrying the unmistakable vicious air of Busan street thugs. These weren't corporate enforcers. They were street soldiers. "Kim Hyun-Suk," the lead man said in Korean, his voice dripping with malice as he spat on the ground. "Did you really think the Pacific Ocean was wide enough to hide a dog of the Kim faction?" Hyun-Suk slowly let his hands fall to his sides, his muscles coiling like a spring, his mind instantly reverting to the lethal instincts he had tried so hard to bury. "Who sent you? The Park Syndicate is dead. The Kims are gone. There is nothing left in Busan for you to fight for. The war is over." "Our families starved when you collapsed the Kim faction," the man spat, pulling a heavy silver pistol from his jacket. "You survived. You got rich in America. You play the businessman while we had to beg for scraps from the Chinese on the docks. You owe us, Kim, in blood." "I don't do that work anymore," Hyun-Suk said, keeping his voice incredibly calm, though his eyes scanned the alley, calculating the distance between himself and the shooter. "Leave. Go back to Busan while you still can. I have no quarrel with you." "But we have one with you," the man sneered, raising the gun and lining up the shot. "Wait!" Hyun-Suk shouted, lunging to the side just as the first shot echoed through the narrow brick alleyway. Bang! The bullet tore into Hyun-Suk's left shoulder, the impact spinning him around and slamming him against the brick wall. He grunted, white-hot pain exploding through his chest, but his survival instincts, honed by a youth spent in the absolute worst slums of Busan, kicked in. He grabbed a heavy metal trash bin, hurling it at the second man who was drawing his weapon. Bang! Bang! Another bullet grazed his thigh, tearing through his trousers and drawing a line of fire. Hyun-Suk stumbled, his leg buckling, but he managed to pull a heavy iron pipe from a nearby construction pile, swinging it with desperate, brutal force. The pipe caught the lead shooter across the jaw with a sickening crack. The man went down, his gun skittering across the wet concrete. But Hyun-Suk was losing blood fast. The wound in his shoulder was deep, pumping dark red arterial blood down his arm. He collapsed to his knees, his vision blurring as the cold rain mixed with his sweat. The third man approached slowly, a cruel smile on his face as he raised his weapon to finish the job. "Die like your father, Kim." Suddenly, the heavy metal back door of Lapis Blue flew open with a loud bang. Jae-Seung stood there, a heavy iron fireplace poker in his hand, his eyes blazing with a terrifying primal fury. "Hey!" Jae-Seung roared, rushing into the alley like a demon. Seeing that the element of surprise was gone and hearing the distant, wailing sirens of LAPD cruisers drawn by the gunfire, the remaining thugs cursed in Korean. They grabbed their injured leader, dragging him into the black sedan. The tires screeched violently against the wet asphalt as they sped away into the traffic. Jae-Seung dropped the poker and knelt beside Hyun-Suk, immediately ripping off his own linen shirt to press it against his friend's bleeding shoulder. "Hyun-Suk, hold on, man. Keep your eyes on me," Jae-Seung yelled, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance! Stay awake!" "No! No police!" Hyun-Suk gasped, his face turning an ash gray, his breath rattling in his throat as he gripped Jae-Seung's arm. "Just take me to St. Jude's. Tasha." "I've got you, brother. Just stay with me," Jae-Seung muttered, his hands already covered in Hyun-Suk's warm blood as he helped him stand. "Don't you dare close your eyes." The emergency room at St. Jude's Hospital was pure, unadulterated chaos. Sirens wailed continuously outside, and the ambient noise of cardiac monitors, shouting doctors, and crying families created a wall of sensory overload. Tasha was in the middle of charting a patient at the nurse's station when the red trauma phone began to ring. The charge nurse picked it up, her expression instantly turning grim as she listened to the dispatcher. "Tasha, we've got a walk-in trauma coming through the ambulance bay right now. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, heavy arterial bleeding, hypotensive," the nurse yelled, slamming the phone down. "Clear bay 2, get the trauma team ready." "On it," Tasha said, her professional instincts taking over instantly, pushing her personal exhaustion aside. She grabbed a pair of sterile gloves, snapping them onto her hands. "What's the ETA?" "They're here now. A private vehicle just pulled up to the doors." The double doors burst open with a violent crash. Jae-Seung, his bare chest and jeans soaked in dark blood, was helping two paramedics wheel a gurney into the bay. Tasha stepped forward, her mouth opening to give clinical instructions, but the words died in her throat, her breath catching. On the gurney lay Hyun-Suk. His face was a terrifying shade of gray, his eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate gasps. The white sheet beneath him was rapidly turning a dark, heavy crimson. For one horrifying second, the professional mask Tasha had worn for years shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her heart felt like it had been physically seized by a cold hand. That's the end of part 1. Thank you for staying this long. We hope you come back for the rest of the story. Tell me in the comments, should Tasha have crossed the line? Will Hyun-Suk trust himself to keep her safe from his ghosts? What if healing her means hurting them both? And let me know where you're listening from. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the stories in our Lapis Blue Chronicles.